All right. I'm a little early. I got a question, and I was going to do a separate video on it, but I said let me talk about it in tonight's live stream. So um, as everyone starts to tune in, welcome, Born Shamir. Um, as everyone starts to tune in, the name of the live stream is going to be about song composition, recording, mixing, mastering, and then distribution. The reason why I say that because that's how songs go from someone's head until it can be heard by the public, pretty much in that order, right? So um sometimes when we think of songs, we think of the actual music that we're listening to. But the music that we're listening to is actually a song composition and arrangement, and it's an interpretation of how the musicians are playing it and how the producer is basically interpreting this song. And so you can have a song, and then you can have two or three different compositions, meaning two different arrangements. Sometimes we call them remixes or whatever. Um, and then uh, once the idea is ready, whatever how it's going to, whatever the case may be, then it's ready to be recorded. After it's recorded, then it's ready to be mixed. And then after it's ready to be mixed, it's ready to be mastered. And after mastered, it's ready to be distributed so the public can hear it, whether it's digitally or in some sort of hard medium, like a CD or whatever. Um, but when we think of song, the first thing we think of is the music, right? Um, and So I wanted to talk about that um, because I got a question about um, songs and being, being a good musician and all that, and the factor of how basically the musicianship portion of it. And I always say this is the biggest misconception about, and I used to get this a lot from people that would find out, even they would find out I had a recording studio, and somehow they think all of that, the song composition, recording, mixing, mastering, all that, and everything is what a studio does. And a recording studio is just the third portion of, well, like I said, in telling in the video, it's a recording studio. It can also be a mixing studio and a mastering studio, but the primary portion of it is for recording. And this is where you'll get across quite a few people that um, they seem to think, for example, if I have a recording studio and because I'm a musician, sometimes they think I'm the one that's supposed, that's what the recording studio does. I'm the one that creates the music, play the instruments, and also, record and everything else. And I'm like, no, if you went down to like, I would say any of the major recording studios, um, their job is not to provide musicians. It's the artist and the producer's job to provide musicians or the music tracks or whatever they're going to use to record. Recording studios just there to record it. That's all. And they don't seem to understand that. They think that recording is the whole package. And I'm like, welcome Oglepix. Uh, am I saying that right? I say, I see Oglepix, or am I saying that? Is it Oglepix? I'm gonna make sure I'm not butchering people's names of their YouTube chats. So, anyhow, so I had this I made a video about what a recording studio is and what is not. And sometimes, because it seemed like even some of the artists that I've recorded, I was the one that ended up doing the musical arrangements. And so it's like I have to give people a reminder that as a recording studio, if you went to Los Angeles or Detroit or Dallas or Miami or wherever, any place where there's a recording studio, and you had the same mindset, you're just going to blow your money, even though they might be charging 100, 150 or $200, whatever they're charging. And you went in there with the concept, welcome DL. If you come in there with the concept that I'm gonna go to this studio, I'm gonna use well-known, like let's say East West in Los Angeles on Hollywood Boulevard, right? You walk in there and you say, okay, it's a recording studio. You in there and they're like, okay, we're gonna book the time today from 12 p.m. to like 10 p.m., right? 10 hours. It's gonna be $150 an hour. So you already know 10 hours at $150 an hour is about $1,500. And you went in there, okay, and you just start, they're gonna look at you like, or you're looking at them like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do next? They're like, well, it's on you. That's what they're gonna tell you. They're gonna like, well, it's on you, they're gonna look at you like, okay, well, what are we doing? That's what the engineer's gonna look at. Okay, what are we doing? And they're gonna like, well, I thought y'all had the music. They're gonna look at you like, music for what? Why would we have music? Why would we have your music? You're supposed to, we're here to record your music, So that's why that's reason why I said that's what a recording studio is not. He says, you can say it any way you want, but before Reverend Ojila Picks. Ojila Picks. Okay. I got you. Ojila Picks. Okay, gotcha. Okay. So that's what a recording studio is not. They're not there to create your music. They're not there to come up with the ideas of producing like that. They're just simply there to record. Now, the recording studio may have different sets of tools to do that. Some have mixing consoles and lots of outboard gear, lots of microphones, different rooms and things like that. Other recording studios do not. Some recording studios they don't have a recording console because they just don't need it. They might have microphone preamps or whatever. They might have the software. They might have Pro Tools or whatever. Some recording studios have a hard disk recorder. Some studios even still have a tape machine. And they might have different types of compressors and microphones and all that. But that's the reason why they have the equipment, is for the engineer to have a choice. He might want to use this compressor. He might want to use that compressor. He might want to use this mic pre. He might want to use the console's mic pre. That's the reason why they have all that gear. But it's not there to say, okay, I'm going to come up with your song ideas. No, it's a totally different process. So let's start with a song, because it's kind of like, I think the question was, being a song like that. Naturally, the artist or producer and musicians, some artists have recording studios, some artists have, or whatever, some producers have recording studios, some musicians have recording studios. Some people is an artist, musician, and producer all in one. It really depends. But the object I'll use, for example, I'm pretty sure Whitney Houston, when she was alive, could play piano or something like that. I don't know. They never really, because you always know Whitney Houston to be a singer, but she probably played the piano or something like that. A lot of artists that known for them to just sing actually play instruments as well, but we just don't sing instruments because that's not their main. It's like with Luther Vandross when he was alive, he actually played piano, and so forth. And so the song, do you have to be an amazing musician? Not really. You can hire musicians to play the parts for you. The thing is, when you have a musician, you can try to express, the musician, whether it's a drummer, bass player, guitar player, piano, what the idea that you're trying to come across. Now, if you are a musician, then naturally you know if you're going to play the stuff yourself, naturally you want to play it well. And I made a video on that. How do you become really good? There's only one way to really become good at being a musician, and that is practice. Period. There's no other way around it. You have to put in the hours. If you don't put in the hours, you know, that's like anything, right? So now song/song composition, you know, that all should be thought about before you're going to even record, because once you start, when it's time to record, those are just the choices of tools you're going to use, right? Because once you get it recorded, then it's ready to be mixed together to make it one sound like a record, right? And then after that, it's ready to be mastered, so it makes so it sounds good on every medium, right? And then after that, it's ready to be distributed to the public. So that's the kind of the topic for tonight. Is just kind of like where we at, you know, in that. Welcome, Matty Two Hats, Ojella Picks, DL, and Born Shamir, and I'm sure we got some more people. So I've, you know, like I said, going back, there have been people that thought song and song composition is the same, and they're not, because a song is like I'll go back to the Bible, right? The book of Psalms, you know, poems, writings, and all that. Those are songs. It's kind of weird to say a song without actually having any music to it, but the song, like the lyrics, you can have a lyric to some word, you know, the words to a song. That's the actual song, is the actual lyrics, you know, or even a melody line or whatever, or some sort of melody. That's the song. And, you know, a lot of times we think of songs as being the entire arrangement, you know, the drums, the bass, guitar, and all that. That's actually the song composition. So this is the reason why it's kind of critical when you're doing your copyright forms. You got your PA form and your SR form. Performance form is actually performing the song composition. So it's like I'm going to record. That's why whenever you do a song, you create music for your songs, you want to do two PA forms. You want to do the PA form for the lyrics / song idea, and then you want to do a SR form, a sound recording. And that kind of breaks off into, you know, into the publishing and the licensing, and it breaks down to, you know, who can actually authorize to do what, you know, when it comes, you know, legally, when it comes to these songwriting, these copyrights. The reason I'm saying all this is because it becomes a legal battle. Like, believe if you have a song idea, bring in your some lyrics, you write some lyrics, and you whatever is in your head or whatever, technically it's already copyrighted, it's yours. Let's say you whatever it is, and now I want to record this idea. That's where a sound or, you know, SR form to come up with the arrangement. So if I have a song, you can get 10 different musicians, or let's say 10 different guitar players, 10 different drummers, 10 different bass guitars, 10 different piano players or whatever, the same song idea, and all 10 different musicians, those different musicians will interpret and play it a little differently. So critically, the song arrangement, when it's recorded, will be the big determining factor to whether people like the song in general altogether. Believe it or not. The song, how it's arranged, because if the drummer doesn't play the rhythm to capture people, the groove, the feel of it, people are not going to like it. Or the chord structures, and I probably should have brought out my keyboard and all that to let y'all hear what I'm talking about. But the bass player, you know, how he plays it, because some bass players may play a bass line and they may be pretty basic with it. You know, you might have, you know, some drums going do cut do cut do cut do cut, right? That might be the rhythm, or might do cat do do cat do cat do do cat. Those are two different feels. The first feel might be the one that grab people, right? Versus the other one might do. The other one might be a little bit more boring. It might not capture people, right? And let's say the same thing with the bass player. One bass player might play do. He might be playing kind of basic, right? The other bass player might go do. He might play it, give it a little bit more. That can be the difference in whether people are gonna like the song arrangement when it's recorded, right? Same thing with the chord choices, the whatever the guitar, he might be playing strumming some chords, or he might be playing some little guitar line. That also could be the determining factor. And then the way the singer sings it, the way the singer, the way they might in the way they're gonna sing the song can be determined whether people like a song or not. So that's all falls in the song sound composition. The recording portion is just the tools you're going to do to capture that. I'm gonna go in this studio. I'm gonna, they may have a Neve console, or you can go in this studio, they might have an SSL, or they go this studio, they might have a API or whatever. They might use these sort of preamps with these microphones, or they might go in this studio, whatever the case. That's just the recording portion. But sometimes we get caught up with that, right? And then the mixing is just when everything's recorded. The song idea is laid down, is recorded. Now it's time to mix that. I'm going to add some delays here. I'm going to do this here or whatever. I'm going to add reverbs here, whatever. I'm going to maybe add on drum samples on top of the regular recorded drums or whatever. All this in the mixing. And then the master guy, he's just going to go there and say, okay, I'm going to use certain compressors, certain limiters and all that to make sure the peaks are right. They get the sound a certain volume level and all this. And then after that, it's ready to be distributed. Once it's done, it's mastered, and it is ready to go so everyone can get it distributed. They can download it, or they can buy it on a CD or whatever. So man says, for sure, you can dress up a song in any style you like. Yeah, that's just a song arrangement. It's kind of like I'll use Rhythm in the Sky by Stevie Wonder. Then you can go by to the remix that was done by Intro, Rhythm in the Sky. Sometimes someone else's arrangement of a remix can be better than the original. It's almost like when I listen to Luther Vandross's Superstar, it's hard to listen to Karen Carpenter's Superstar after listening to Luther Vandross. Nally, everyone knows Latney Alley was his band. He's the one that came up with that arrangement for Superstar. It's hard to listen to the original. Then sometimes people can do a remake or remix or different song arrangement of the same song, and you're like, I don't like the remix, I like the original. So but a lot of times it really determines, sometimes it so many factors to it, right? It's kind of like it can really depend on how the bass player plays his part, or the guitar player plays their part, the keyboard player, the chord choices they're using, the vocal, the lead, how they sing it, how the backgrounds, the harmony parts, all that can determine whether people are going to like a song or not. Some people might like one interpretation while other people might not like. This is, that's the thing with music. So that's just kind of what I was kind of going to hit on tonight about that sound composition versus, then the recording. But we can talk about any of that. We can even talk about the music business. I saw a video before I was coming on live. It was talking about why these artists are broke. And it's kind of like, my thought was this: you really have to be rich and maintain staying rich to live rich. And what did I mean by that? Well, it's kind of like if I got $1 million home, my property tax for $1 million home, you think about that, it's probably about $10,000 a year in property tax. Easy. And that's not including all the monthly costs, the main, 3 or 4 thousand, any easy $15,000-$20,000, and that's just for $1 million home versus the $2 or $3 or $4 million home. The amount of money you're spending. So if you only had $3 million, you can't live in $1 million home. You won't be able to sustain it if you got no other income. If you had $3 million in the bank to live in $1 million home, you'll probably go through that $3 million in the bank within about 5 years, if you're not generating any other revenue that keeps you sustaining with that amount. And this is the reason why you start seeing celebrities selling homes and $1 million homes, because no one can afford a $5 million home if you're only making, because what do they say? The mortgage, your mortgage should be about 25% of your monthly income, right? So if your mortgage is $5,000 a month, or that means you have to be making $20,000 a month to add a 25%. I don't know anyone making $20,000 a month. Most people with the jobs be lucky to make $3,000 to $4,000 a month, which means your mortgage is more like $800 to $1,000, more realistically, right? So it's expensive to live expensive. So getting back to, like I said, I was just that was the name of the title. But like I said, we can, if anyone want to chime in, we can talk about the recording portion or the mixing portion or even the mastering, whatever y'all want to tune in to, that throws your boat. But I just want to throw that out, kind of address it. Just want to throw that out there. So yeah, the song composition is crucial, because if you don't have a good song arrangement, the recording in the studio is kind of pointless without a good song to record it, right? It's kind of like, because recording studio, we get so caught up with the recording studio, like, well, it's like this Alan Heath console behind me. Yeah, it's like mixing console, but it can't do anything if I don't have anything to put through it, right? So anyhow, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I'm just kind of throwing that out there for the live stream tonight. Because I'm really, I want to address something right quick. I think I saw a video. Someone that tuned in or wrote something about, they saw one of my videos. I must have did about 3 or 4 years ago. And they were like, the reason why they may suggest something like, I seen this video, thanks, or whatever the case may be. And then they'll say, can you do a video on this or that, or this or that? And a lot of times I don't do it because I've already done a video on it. So it's kind of like, I'm not going to redo that again. It's usually someone new and probably don't realize I've done a video on it. It's like, all you gotta do is go back, because I think I got like over 200 videos posted. Just go back and look into the archives. Just like when some people might ask something on the video that they saw, they'll say, well, can you explain this? And like, well, it's explained in the video. So that's why I don't address certain comments. I look at it and say, they might ask something like on the Allen Heath or whatever. I've done 6 videos on that Allen and Heath. I just, I think they saw the video for the first time. Can you show me how the routing on the Allen Heath, how, for the DAW or whatever? And I'm like, I got a video on that. Well, that's what I'm thinking. I've already got a video on it. Just go back and look at it. It'll say how I use the Allen Heath with the DAW, something to that extent. So, yeah. Anyhow, so that's just kind of what I wanted to hit on in this live stream. Is just song composition, the recording, mixing, and all that. So if anyone's got any questions, throw it in the chats right quick. Or there's whatever's on your mind. Because it's kind of like, probably should have made this a Q&A session too. I ought to do a live stream like that too. just where it's just Q&A, questions and answers, right? So once again, I want to thank everyone for tuning. It's a Sunday night. I know some people are probably watching the games. I don't know if we got any football fans out here. I need to look at the NFL stats. I need to check and see. I need to check and see if I was hoping. I'm hoping the Bengals do well this year because it seems like the Bengals always seem to choke. But so let me see. Max says, "What are my thoughts on making shorter songs to appeal to people's attention spans?" You know, there used to be a radio standard that a song should be no more than 3 to 3.5 minutes, right? Because anything over 5 minutes was called an extended version, right? And I think songs started getting 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Then they had 6 minutes or whatever the case may be. Because there was the 5 minutes, there was how they would pay and tack on an extra so many percentage of money for anything past 5 minutes. I think in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the standard for songs were only 2 to 2.5 minutes. Songs are really short. And I think back in the day, they used to have a structure for songs. In other words, it was typically maybe an intro, verse, chorus, verse 2, chorus, maybe a bridge, and then maybe a 16 or 32 bar vamp, and that was it. Then they started adding 8 bars, because the standard structure for most songs were about bars of 8 bars, right? 8 measures, right? So you would have these 8 bar intro. Then you would probably go into an 8 bar chorus. Then you would start the verse, and the verse would sometimes be just 8 bars. Something they got to the point where they were doubling the verse to 16 bars. Then they would go into a 8 bar change. Then they go to the 8 bar chorus, then another 16 bar second verse, and then they would go into an 8 bar change, and then maybe they would go into a 16 bar chorus. Then they might go into an 8 bar bridge. Then they might go into an 8 bar solo, sax solo, guitar solo, whatever. Then they might go to the 8 bar breakdown. Then they would go into a 16 to 32 vamp. So you can see how, and based on your BPMs, beats per minute, the song, especially if it's only 90 beats per minute, that can become a 5.5 minute, 6 minute song by itself with that much. Or if it's, of course, you can have the same song structure, make it 120 beats. Then, of course, the time's going to shorten because it's faster beats per minute. So it got to the point where they were saying, these producers and these radios, and executive and all this for the radio and all that, was saying, okay, the intro's too long, make the intro shorter, cut out, you got to get rid of that solo, that sax solo, whatever. You got the chorus is too long or whatever. You got to shorten. So producers and they would have to go back and cut arrangements and stuff like that. So I think as far as going back to attention span, I think it's just not, what I'm noticing now is people are still fascinated with music, but people, as far as just being, what I'm seeing, amazed at the talent of musicians and stuff like that. I don't think that's really capturing people's attention anymore. To be amazed, it's almost like where you have a guy that he may play a bass guitar in a song 30, 40 years ago, because everyone was learning to play instruments, would be captivated by listening to other musicians, whether it's watching them live or hearing it in recordings. Now it's kind of like people don't really give a bass player say any second thought unless you're really into musicians. Most people, the average consumer, like they see a guy playing the bass, they like, yeah, even though they still listen to music. Same thing with a keyboard player and all that. So I think that's what's losing people's attention span, and all these songs need to start getting, that I know that might be a long answer. So so I think that's the reason why the attention span just isn't there to be, it's kind of like so. So let's see. Oh, Matthew said my team won by 1 point in extra time. Well, in Australia, I'm still waiting for my. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, in the United States, the biggest three sports that we have, four. Football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. Sometimes it's tennis, and then sometimes we might get caught up into like the Olympic games just to watch the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics. But football and basketball and baseball are the three biggest sports in the United States. And right now it's football season and it's basketball season. So yeah. So let's see what else he said. True musicians were always interviewed on TV and radio. Now that's changed on YouTube. Now most people skip through some. It's kind of like, well, another thing, I'll go back to songs that I'm noticing too is everyone's using the same type of song progressions, 1 to 5 to 6 to 4. Now, if you know music and you know music theory, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And they're just rearranging that. It's like, okay, in my thought process, okay, you still got not just one. Okay, for those that don't know, when I say music progressions, okay, arrangements means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? That means the movement of music. We all know do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. That'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Except in the bass is carrying that arrangement, right? That progression 1, 4, 3, 6, 2, 5. Well, anyhow, to make a long story short, I'm noticing these songs are stuck on 1 to 5 to 6 to 4. It's like, okay, you got 2, you got 3, you got 7. You can go to, you can go more than just 1 to 5 and 6 and 4. And everyone's trying to come up with some sort of arrangement like that. And they're only using 2 chords, a major and a minor chord. That's it. And that's because 1, 4, and 5 are major and 6 is minor. This is knowing theory. So they're stuck on that. And everyone is like being like, that's why people are like, okay, that sound like that. Okay, click, click. No one's doing anything, and no one is creating music that was interesting like they used to do in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Everyone's trying to do this 1, 5, 6, 4 thing, or 1 to 4 to 6 to 5, or 1 to 6 to 4 to 5, or start on 6 to 4 to 5 to 1. One of those 4 combinations of music progressions, and that's why music isn't interesting. It's kind of like, if you listen to you go back to the 80s, I'll go back to like Thriller. Thriller doesn't do the 1 to 5 to 6 4 progression. It just doesn't. Or Billie Jean, or anything on Michael Jackson's album, or Madonna's album, or I'll use Mr. Kier, that's by, or Duran Duran, or a lot of those bands that did, just like with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Earth, Wind, and Fire did a lot of changes. Those are a lot of modulated key changes. Like, I go like, That's the Way of the World as an example by Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's not a typical 1 to 4, the 1 to 5 to 6 4 arrangement. That's what's the problem with today's music versus, instead of going from 1 to 5, how about going from 1 to 2? Or you can make 2, instead of being a minor, you can go from D to D flat as your next, or whatever. You can go from D flat instead of going D flat. Man, I want to go to a B, make it a minor, or switch it to a B major 9 or whatever. I have to use my keyboard the next time when I start talking about this range so you can actually physically hear what I'm talking about. That's what's gonna make the music more interesting, But as long as people continue to do this 1, 5, 6, 4, and Rick Beato did a very extensive video on that, I think a couple years ago, about how that particular chord arrangement is killing music. It's killing people's interest, because it's like, okay, I've heard that you may use, instead of keyboards, you may use a guitar sound or whatever, but it's the same arrangement. It's got node. So that's what it is. Oh yeah, Matt, you said, yeah, it's the standardized and corporized corporate, getting bored. Yeah, in other words, because they're like, sometimes you come there and doing something interesting that they used to do, whatever the case. Like I go back and use like Boyz II Men, especially when they first came out their first album, when that came out, the Motown Philly album, whatever. And or just going back to just artists from that era, from the 80s and 90s, going back to when I'll just go back when Teddy Riley and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and producers like that would come up with these arrangements, like Rhythm Nation, or Janet Jackson, what have you done for Lee, what have you done for me lately, and those type of songs, or ooh, yeah. They're not doing it because people aren't being creative like that. That's why music just don't have that. That's why even people like me continue to jump back to that, because the music's a lot more interesting. So, he says, Max says, at least the grunge bands mix it up a bit. You just, it's kind of like if you go back and listen to, I was listening to that song by Guns N' Roses. I can't remember the song. I can't remember how the guitar line goes. Cry. That song, whatever. I can't remember the name of the song. But Sweet Mama Mine. That song, whatever it is, people might go throw it in. They'll probably throw what that song is in the chats. Sweet Child of Mine. Yeah, that's it. Sweet Child of Mine. If you go back and listen to the 90s, 80s, 70s, even some of the early 2000s, even when, being creative, even believe it or not, those are chromatics, even with I'll go back to even some hip hop stuff. I'll use 50 Cent In the Club, right? Dun, 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 dun. Those are chromatics, right? Even that, as simple as a little lines like that. We got to make, music. It's like going back to some, the 90 ushers of the 90s. You make me want to be one with, with Usher or whatever the case. I think that's what's wrong with, if I go back and listen to the 90s, listen to like SWV. You're the one for me. Do. So, but anyhow, I think that's what it is. So, matter of fact, I was watching a video with I forget his name, Sean. I think his name was Sean from Boyz II Men. He was doing an interview with Jimmy Jam. They were talking about music and not having bridges and stuff like that, but they was really basically talking about why music doesn't have what it has in that interview, So anyhow, like I said, I always thank everyone for tuning in. That's what I was, wanted to talk about tonight was the song composition, which really, if you think about it, before we even get into the recording, the mixing and the mastering, that's what's important, really, a good song and song composition out of all of it, because it really doesn't, the recording, mixing, mastering doesn't matter if if the songs aren't likable. It's kind of like I can be impressed. It's like I can go and y'all probably saw these two. let's see, you can see like Andrew Masters does a, or Warren Hewitt, a Produce Like a Pro, and all these people that does studio tours. Studio tours are great. But okay, let's say I had the most vintage style recording studio. Let's say I have let's say I have a Neve console and whatever the case, and Pultecs and Universal Audio 1176s and all this. That gear is pointless if I have no good songs to run that music through to make, a good recording, a good bass track. Okay, the bass guitar sounds amazing, so I'm going to run it through an LA style compressor to really enhance what he's doing. That's what the whole point of the recording, whether using that or even if you're plug-in, if you like plugins. But that's pointless if there's no good music, no good song arrangements, no good, So that's why it starts with the song. The song, like I got some lyrics. I write, the song. I'm gonna talk about this relationship I used to be in or whatever. I'm gonna write them down some lyrics, how she left me for another guy or whatever. I'm gonna write them lyrics down. I'm gonna talk about that. Now I gotta come up with a melody line for that type of song. She left me. So now I gotta come up with a melody. She left me. What's a good melody for that? She left me. She left me, or whatever. I don't know. That's what's gonna. So people like they're listening, because you're singing about. And I think that's another thing that's been lost. Good storylines and songs. They were talking about that too. People aren't really like verse 1 would talk about a situation, and verse 2 would talk about another situation, and third verse would talk about another situation to sum up what the chorus was talking about, which is basically and also make it be a hit. In other words, it's going to be where it's a hit. It grabs people. And it's like any song like that, that the main chorus is the hook, that not, which makes it a hit is the hook. That's what we used to call it. The song hooks you. It's a hook. You're like, oh, that song's a hit because it hooks you. And then on top of that, because it's a hit, it makes you listen to the lyrics of the song. And then the arrangement is like a killer drum beat to it, killer bass line, killer chord structures, killer arrangements, all these lines and all that is what made people like the song. The recording, how well the tools I'm going to use to capture that. Then once it's all captured, now the mixing engine, like, okay, how can I really mix this together to make this a cohesive song? And then after that, the mastering, he's just going to master it to make it a final industry standard product. And then when people listen to it on the radio or they listen to it on YouTube or live, streaming like Pandora or whatever, Spotify, whatever. But I think we've gotten so caught up with the recording tools part. I'm like, well, so a good song is the key portion by talent. It's kind of like I have Mariah Carey. It's going to sing the song or whatever. It's going to take a singer like that, or whatever, who your singer is. They know how to sing to make you like it, the song idea. So other than that, everyone's kind of quiet tonight. I'm really shocked. I know I got some viewers watching, but everyone's kind of quiet. I hope I'm not boring y'all with this live stream. I hope I'm not boring people. Because Maddie said someone else want to ask some questions. I don't, that's just the topic tonight. But unless y'all want to switch it up, I don't, because if not, I'll probably wrap it up here in the next 15 minutes. Because I'm not, that's just what I want to talk about, but we don't have to talk about if it ain't capturing y'all attention. So I don't know. I think people like when I talk about gear itself. So sometimes people come here to talk about gear, which I like talking about gear. And gear is fun. Um, but gear is gear. It's just tools. It's almost like talking about Craftsman socket sets. Like, okay, yeah, there's also, Snap on. There's also Cornwell. There's different manufacturers of sockets. We can only talk about preamps for so much, right? But I'll talk about preamps if y'all want to. I said, Matt, you said people like talking about gear more than songwriting. You're probably right. You're probably right. People like, I really don't have anything to talk about as far as songs. Some people don't, then some people might be thinking the time, well, I already knew this about good songs and song composition arrangements and stuff. They probably knew that, but so I don't know. Oh, Born Shamir said, well, let's talk about those chord progressions. Okay. Like I said, with chord progressions, because that's really, believe it or not, when you're listening to a song, 8 bars, 16 bars, whatever the song itself, you're listening to a chord progression. If it even stays on one, it never moves. It stays on one. It stays riding on C, right? And the key is C. And it's just doing do, 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 do. There have been songs that never moved. All they did was build on that same C. They might start with just drums, do, 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 do. Then they might have. Then also the bass player just playing C. Do, 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 bang. He might do a little, slap, little boom, bang, boom, 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 bang, boom, boom. And now also the keyboard player might just throw a C chord on top of it, like a brass sound. He might do something like that, right? And also the singer might come in there and say, "Want to? Don't you want to? Want to? Want to?" And it may stay like that the entire song. It's just a dance groove funk song. They do that a lot, especially in funk. Funk music was really notorious for that. They just, funk was all about rhythm, So, but chord progressions, because you got 1 through 7, you can, in theory, they would have this rule where 1 can go, your next move will be anywhere from 2 to 7. So 1 can go between, your next move would either go to 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 to 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, whatever. They say, well, if you go to 4, well, there's only certain places 4 can go after that. Like 4 can go to 2, it can go to 5 or 6 or something like that. Then they say if you go to 3, 3 can only move from 3 to 6 in that progression. And if you went 4, whatever, or if you went to 5, 5 can go anywhere. Then if you 6, it only goes to 2 to 5, whatever. And then 7 can only go to 4, 4 and 5 or whatever. So you had to follow those rules theoretically. But people got more inventive. They said, well, we can modulate. I don't have to stay in the same key. I'm starting the key C, but I want to modulate to the key of D flat, which is a half step up. I'm going from C to D flat. Okay, where was a good place to modulate? On the 5. So that's why sometimes you hear musicians, they might be, screaming out their chord progressions. 1, go to 5, go to 4, go to 3, go to 6, okay, go to 2, whatever. They might start screaming out the chord progression. That's what they're doing as a musician, right? And a keyboard player, based on the chord progression, those are chords are going to follow. There's usually 4 types of chords. So 1, 4, and 5 are usually majors. So your C, so C, if you're in the key of C, 1 would be C major, 4 would be F major, and then 5 would be G major. Then if you go to 2, 2 would be D minor, So then 3 would be E minor. Then of course 6 would be A, which would be A minor. And then 7 is the on the oddball, is the one that's the diminished chord, B diminished, which would be B, D, and F, right? So that would be the typical. So if you come over to a chord progression, 1 to 4, wherever you write your progression, if you go 1 to 4, 3 to 6, 2 to 5, so you know that 1, you play C major. It could be a C major 7, it could be a C triad, C7, C major 9, whatever you want to use, how you want to invert it and everything. You go to 4, well, that's F. It could be F major 7, F major 9, whatever you want. If you go to 3, they want you to go to E minor. And if you go to 6, because they want you to go from 3 to 6, you go from E minor to A minor. It may be A minor 7, whatever. Then if you go to 2, because 2 is a minor, that means if you play D, you're going to play D minor. Then if you go to 5, resolve it on 5, which would be a G major. So, I need to do a video on that. I really do need to do a video on that. Let's see. Dio said, "What's the difference? Does the higher and what difference does higher and in equipment make towards making a commercially competitive song? Does it make it sound better if the same engineer was using lower and product versus expensive?" Well, I would say this: out of all the most expensive gear that's going to make a difference, you definitely, I would say this. I would definitely try to choose some really nice converters. Invest in some, you can get away with a $200, converter, but I would definitely say a good converter, because that's what's doing the processing for the sampling rate of what you're converting from analog to digital and digital to analog. The second thing I would say, preamps. Definitely preamps. Definitely preamps. I would say you don't have to have a $5,000 preamp, but I would definitely say a $50 preamp, but you probably can get away with the preamps and audio interfaces. I choose not to. I'd stay away from, I think you would notice a quality difference in a better quality preamp. Welcome, Andre. And so forth. It's really, really, really splitting hairs when it comes to compressors and EQs, and even reverb units. Because some people are going to say Lexicon for like the 40L, or some people would say something like a Bricasti reverb unit or whatever the case, or even, but I tend to do just perfectly fine with my Yamaha Rev 7, my Yamaha SP90s, my Roland SRV 2000, and so forth, when it comes to those type of reverb units and so forth. EQ is the same thing. Like for the most part, I can get away with just using EQ on this Allen Heath perfectly fine. A lot of the instruments I use do not require a lot of EQing, if that makes sense. Compressors, some people would sit there and say, like, they're going to love like an LA2A and a 1176 as the most two dominant compressors, but the only thing with an LA2A and like for 1176, for example, the ratio on 1176, you go from 4-1 or 8-1, 16-1, or all the way to limiting. Sometimes you don't require that much compression ratio. Sometimes it only requires 3-1, where you're not getting 3-1 out of an 1176. You're just not. So you might need to be a little bit more surgical with something like, I have Alesis 3630s that can do 3-1. So it really depends. Welcome Tactical MIDI, MIDI and so forth. So the higher end products, where it's going to really make a difference in so forth, is out of anything, some decent mic pre's. I would say that. If I was gonna, if I had the money to get some really nice, if I was gonna spend some expensive gear out of anything, at least get a couple of nice mic pre's. Like I have my Universal Audio 11, my Universal Audio 610. You can see on my shoulder here is a Universal Audio 610. That's about $1,900. You can, something like that, you'll be perfect. I think that would be, but you don't have to spend $1,900 on that. Or even I would say even the Focusrite ISA 110. It's about $500 to $600. It's a little single preamp. It just doesn't have, it's not a channel strip. It doesn't have a compressor. But even a mic pre like that will be perfectly fine. I think you'll be at least happy with that. So everything else, and believe it or not, everything else you can get away with, you can actually get away with even with plugins. But mic pre's are really, really hard to really, if you want to capture that high-end sound, it's the mic pre's. So let's see. Oh, Deals asked Elson, how long should it take a person to learn how to comp vocals, EQ tracks, and mix? It is hard to handle projects with large track counts, like 50 to 150. I don't really want to deal with anyone that, you come to me 150 tracks. I'm like, you got to remember, it's still, can you imagine? Think of 150 tracks as the same as walking to a room with 150 people talking. It's the same concept. You got 150 people, you can't make it out. 24 to 30, that's the max you can manage to be able to hear anything manageable is probably, and some of those tracks are being cohesive. It's kind of like you can have, let's say it's strings. Let's say you have a 50-piece orchestra and 10 of them are violins as an example. Well, most of those violins are playing the same part. So those can be grouped into a 2 stereo bus group of those strings, those violins, and so forth. And then you might have, 3 or 4 channels of percussions, like some timpanis or whatever, that need to be on their own individual channels. But they're not playing those instruments all the time. They're not playing those timpanis all the time. But that sound's got to be manageable. Now it's going to start to sound like clutter with 150 tracks going at the same. That's a lot of tracks. So if you had 150 tracks, I would, the best, any mixing engineer is going to bust a lot of those tracks down into groups, and it's going to get rid of stuff that just doesn't need to be there. Why would I need to have 25 melody lines playing at the same time? You're not going to hear, but you can only hear one distinctive melody line. And especially if it's a bunch of instrument melody lines, then why would I want to have that cluttering competing with the vocals? I wouldn't, because the vocals is what you're listening to in the music, right? So if that's the case, so you got to kind of, be leery of what's manageable so you can mix it. EQ, as far as it really, I would say it shouldn't take a person long especially if you just learn to download compression and EQ guides. There's a lot of EQ and compression guides, like why do you want to run 5-to-1 on the kick drum as an 1 for a ratio? What attack, what release? There's guides of that, and after that, you can kind of vary from there to come up with your own setting on that compressor on a kick drum, an example. But you just got to keep doing that. So it shouldn't be taking years. Same thing with EQ. Once you really start understanding and hearing the EQ, you'll know exactly when I should start boosting 250 or when I should cut 250 or 500 or 1200 or 2000 on an EQ. Okay, why do I not want to boost 7K on a vocal, for example, because 7K is going to start to introduce sibilance. You start getting a lot of, I don't want a whole bunch of, whenever somebody say something like an S, or why do I want to reduce, why do I want to cut 350 or whatever on whenever, especially when the singer says P's and B's, you know, you want to you don't want to get a lot of boof, boof, when they pronounce B's and P's in their vocals. So I want to start cutting, or whatever the case may be. So, um, so I know that was kind of like, but eventually you're gonna want, as far as expensive, there's reason why expensive gear is always more preferable over cheap gear, because usually the problem with cheap gear, believe it or not, is not always sonic. A lot of times the problem with a lot of really, really, really cheap gear is because they break, because they're using, it's like the knobs and switches. They tend to be, it's kind of like, I spent $350 on this compressor, and I was sitting down the on and off switch or the ratio switch or whatever, because they got cheap knobs or whatever. That's usually the problem with cheap gear. So, oh yeah, welcome Tactical MIDI. If I did not say welcome. So going back to, let me see. Oh, Matt 2 has said for learning those, let me see, go back to, back to said for those learning songwriting, look at the cycle fifths, or more like the circle fourths and fifths, but I know what you meant. The cycle, fourths and fifths, for like one, like C to F to B flat to E flat to A flat to D flat to G flat to B to C to E to A to D to G and back to C. If you go the opposite direction, you went to circle fifths. But if you go forward, C to F is a fourth, and then from F to B flat is a fourth, and then from B flat to E flat is a fourth, and then E flat to A flat is a fourth, A flat to D flat is a fourth. But if you go the opposite direction, C to F is a fifth. C, then the F to B flat is a fifth, and then B flat to E flat is a fifth. So it's kind of like do 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 do. That's a fifth. Do 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 do. Do 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 do, and so forth. Those are fifths. And those can represent not only the circle fifths and fourths, but also when you look at the circle's fifth, if you look at if you go from C and you go down a fifth to the F, you'll notice that C has no sharps or flats in that key. Once you drop down to F, the key of F is the first stop in the fifth of that circle. What the key of F has one flat in it. If you go down another fifth, you'll land on B flat, and B flat has two flats in it in that key. If you go down a fifth again from B flat to E flat has three flats in that key, and so forth. But if you go fourth from C to F, it's the same thing. You go from C to F and go a fourth up. From, instead of going down to the F, you go up to the F, which is a fourth up. C, D, E, F, and it still has one flat. Then you go from F to B flat, but going a fourth up, it has two flats. And the same thing works also going up forward or backwards for the fifths. Like if you go up a fifth up from C, you end on G. Well, G has one sharp in it. If you go from G to D, it has two sharps in it, and just keep going up a fifth all the way till you get to C sharp or C flat. Then you start the process back over. You end back up on C, because this also helps for developing the progressions and the chords and all that. Like I said, I really need to do an extensive video on that. So let me see. Going back to like I said, Dia says the Focusrite ISA1 is like $500. The Mark II preamp is about $3,000. What's the difference? Well, like I said, the ISA1 is the individual preamp. A lot of times just a single channel, but it's a well-renowned preamp that was used in the circuit for the Focusrite console. It's a Rupert Neve designed preamp, and people like Jack Pewit swears by that preamp. There are probably preamps in One of the other preamps, of course, is a Rupert Neve design. Was we already familiar with the 1073 and the 1084 Rupert Neve preamp, but when he left Neve, created his own, got with, of course, he got with AMEC, and he also came up with the ISA circuit for the Focusrite company. He came up with the ISA 1, but the Mark II preamp is about $3,000. Once again, because I've always focused on that ISA 1. I had to look at the Focusrite Mark II. I haven't really researched that one, but other than probably some upgrades or whatever to it, but I don't see why it would be $3,000. Andre says, I think the preamp is a must. It helps break down the digital. Well, not just that, but you think about it. Like, for example, I have two Avalons, also my Joe Meek, and also my Universal UA 610. Those have tubes in them. And it's the transformer in the tubes that warm the harmonics that those preamps create. It's hard to get that. Because we know our PC or Mac doesn't have tubes or transformers in it. It's just a motherboard, with a CPU and RAM. Everything else is software. It does have an AD to DA converter, which is our sound card, but that's not like you would see in your that's not like what you would see in your an actual audio interface converter. So I'll see. So what about high-end equipment from 20 years ago? Would it sound better or worse than a new once again, it's really, for example, like my Avalon. That Avalon is not a new preamp. That Avalon came out. That Avalon that I got, that's a 90s design preamp. Channel strip. But because of the sonics that it creates, it's like Avalon, like why do we need to change the sonic character that's been using thousands and thousands of records? It's just a typical tube transformer circuit. So what the best way to describe it is, go back and listen to your 80s and 90s records, even though they might be, a little bit digitally enhanced. That's just, a little digitally mastering on them. But overall, the sonic character that is pure analog. And that would answer the question to something that's 20, 30 years ago. Does it sonically sound better? And a lot of people are going to say yes, because it was pure analog over something digital. The thing with digital, and really digital, is really digital sampling. It's sampling the sampler. That's why you'll see 44.1 or 48 or 96 or 192K sampling rate or whatever. You're trying to sample, analog quality at the best conversion rate possible. The sonic character of that, but I don't know. I can't come up with a better way to describe that. But I would say there are certain things that are made today. Really, technically, the only thing that's really made today that's better than 20 years ago would be converters. That's about it. Your AD to DA converters are probably tons better now than they were 20, 30 years ago. Because computers have gotten better. Like today, in 2025, compared to a PC or Mac in 2005. I don't think anybody would want to use a PC or Mac that's 20 years old today. Maddie says, yeah, it's 100 tracks ain't happening. It just to me, it's just too many. It's just, there's too much going on. I'm trying to So I gotta figure out what I'm gonna use and what I'm not gonna use. Sometimes people put stuff in there just to put those stuff in there, like, nah, you don't need that. That's not enhancing the song because you got a little line on, maybe you got a little weird synth line, uh it has to be a line that's really going to enhance the song for me to keep something like that. Some weird little because it was cool to add it in. Sometimes people overfill the song. Less is more sometimes. In certain songs, you don't need to have 25 instruments competing. It just becomes cluttery. Um, okay, so let me see. There are a lot of vocal stacks and drum stems and pop and hip. There are, to me, sometimes, especially when it comes to EDM music or whatever, sometimes it's too much stuff going on for me. And it really is. So that's why it's hard for me to listen to a lot of that type of music because it's too cluttery for me. Aldia says, I'm amazed at how people get string libraries to actually sound like an orchestra. I think that VST orchestra sound. Well, let me tell you, instruments that they use for these like whether it's a VST, like whether strings from a VST instrument or, because really technically from like modern synthesizers, like my Roland Phantom or whatever the case, some of that is modeling from, you got the parameter controls like LFO, low frequency oscillators, stuff like that, HFOs, high frequency oscillators, and all the stuff to make the sound using sine wave and sound and sawtooth sounds and all that to sound like brass and strings. And then some of those are actual sample sounds of actual real string instruments in those VST instruments and in what comes in keyboards. Because strings and brass and even guitar sounds and those instruments sound so realistic, they sound realistic. Sometimes you listen to stuff, you sound like real strings, and they're not. They're just a sample of someone, on a keyboard or whatever. Now the question is, are people going to hear the difference? I would say in today's, with the technology and so forth, no. In a lot of instances, if it sounds like strings, whether real strings or not, they're going to sound like strings. Matt, you said correct. Circle, not yeah, circle fifth. We talking about that circle fifths and so forth. Oh, yeah, Max, you said tube and transformer. It's just the sometimes solid state where you're dealing with just FETs and op amps and all that definitely has a place. But it's kind of like a tube transformer microphone. It's just the warmth of it. It's almost like, how can I best describe to me when I'm listening to string or digital versus analog? It's almost like I'm a EQ, it's almost like this sounds more digital, like this. Even though I can boost the volume up on this microphone to make up. This would be more digital sounding. That if y'all understand what I mean, I can that would be more digital. But if I want to sound a little bit more analog, give it a little bit more, something like that. The best way I can describe that would be more analog sounding. If that makes, and I think the analog warmth is what drives people. Like, okay, it's just like a harmonics. So let's see. People say that the MPC 3000 had the most thump, broad jumps to life. The MPC 4000 supposedly had the best sonic, but new MPCs are clear. And why would the old MPCs compare that with the? I have an MPC. I have a Renaissance. I was at a studio, but I'm not a big MPC like guru like that, like Bolo the producer or Guru, Young Guru, or those guys that are, they just MPC fanatics, like um what's his name, the producer from Atlanta. He used to date Janet Jackson for a minute. I can't think of his name. Anyhow, or a lot of guys like that, because there was also there was also the Roland 8000 MV and all that, but it could be something to do with the converters they were using in those that made them sound like that. Who knows? I don't have an answer for that. Let's see. Tactical mentions, I wish I could get that SSL revival just to run everything through it and get that warm. I commented it on. He's got a channel called Fantastic Tales of Pro Audio, and he was commenting on that. That was for the first time I was like, SSL finally came out with a product that people can actually afford. It's about $2,000 for that channel strip. Because SSL usually when they come out with products, it's usually products no one can afford. So $4,000 would get you two of those channel strips. They're coming out about 19, they come out 2,000, and I was really shocked. I guess SSL finally realized they were making products no one can afford. I made a video on that. SSL makes another. It's like with that Big Six and all that. So, and for the most part, people were running the SSL channel strip plugin, and they were putting that on all these different channels. But plugins, like anything else, can be processor heavy on your PC or Mac. So anyhow, let's see. Andre said, the one thing I learned about music that I think was very important was you have to know what the true sound of an instrument sound like. And now we're talking about, we're going back to the producers and recording engineers that recorded. If you think about that, the 90s, the 80s, 70s, what was the heart of people going to recording studios when it came to the music portion of musicians? There was always a real drummer playing a real drum set. There was always a real bass player playing a real bass, guitar player, several guitar players, keyboard players, guy playing an actual real Hammond B3 organ or a real Fender Rhodes. There was always real horn players playing trumpets and saxes and trombones. And that was the heart of every genre, R&B, country and Western, rock, and whatever. So they had to be equipped to what those instruments sound like, because that's the only thing you had. But as synthesizers and drum machines started to progress in the 80s, and you have guys that started creating music with drum machines instead of getting a drummer. Same thing with, synthesizers start being to emulate string sounds, horn sounds, and stuff like that. There's really no need to really listen to how, paying attention to the details of a real bass player, because some of the songs had synthesizer basses in them. So it's, it really depends on how the song is recorded and mixed compared to understanding if the guitar, bass player, or whatever instrument sounds good or not, knowing what that's supposed to sound like because of the changes in technology and equipment. So let me see. Max says, I have heard described it as, yes, you can trigger strings with keys, etc. That's fine, but a real string quartet can make you well, it's almost like if you really want to, you can get away with strings. I do it all the time with synthesizers, but it's almost like listening to a real orchestra. Like there is a video, it's called Air Studios. They're in London. where they're recording a string orchestra performing the background music for a movie score. And this is being ran through a VR console and all that. If you want to hear the details of a real string, watch that video on YouTube. Air Studios, I forget the name of the movie they used the soundtrack for, but you can hear the quality of that real orchestra. So that is hard to capture. That's what they used to hire real orchestras to record strings, and for a lot of artists. But like I said, but now that keyboards can emulate strings down to even down to being picado sounds and all that, a good musician can really fool you just using a Roland Phantom keyboard strings or Yamaha Motif or Montage or whatever. He can, if he knows how to really understand how strings are supposed to react, you can do that on keyboard synthesizers now. But if a person doesn't understand how strings are supposed to react, how real, the way a real string, how a real violinist would play that, he's not going to capture that. Even though the instrument has that ability to do it, he's not going to know how to do that. So, it says, Tactical Mix said, good sounds from the beginning is also, it's kind of like I was talking about the whole process from the song to the song composition and the arrangement. It can make all the difference in the world to whether people are going to like a song or not. So Warheart Arts, welcome. He says, I'm trying to get a string trio or duo for a song, but it's, when you start hiring real musicians, you're getting down to cost. But sometimes I'll say this, real musicians are worth their weight in gold. I'll say that. So Tactical Committee says, I feel you in the songwriting, how boring it has become. Also need a real singer that knows how to ride a good. It's kind of like with the singer, you could come up with a melody line, right? I can sit there and say, it's, the way you love me, if the singer goes, the way you love me, the way you love me, the way you love me, the way you love me. It's kind of like, people like, that's boring. The way you love me, the way you love me. But if the singer sings it the way you love, and I'm not a singer, but it's the, the way they sing it, that makes a difference, a huge difference, right? So, and that will also determine where people like the song or not. Because you put out a song, you can have this amazing percussions, this crazy bass line, some serious guitar lines, some serious chords, some all that, and then come the way you love me. You just lost people because the singer, that's just boring. And as a producer and all that, I would never let a singer get away with singing something like that. I'm going to put out, we're not putting that out. The way you love me, the way you love me. Oh no. Now, if I was a producer, now as a recording studio, they can sing it the way they want. They're just paying for the recording time. I don't care how they sing it. The way you love me, I'm just, okay, gotcha. That's what's going on in the recording because that's the way you wanted it. So Boris, I'm probably just me that anyhow. Like I said, you'll be amazed when it comes to the strings. There are things like I can go on my Motif and I can get the effect of what a string, because I played in bands and played in the orchestra and so forth and been around. I know how strings, how they're supposed to sound. And how a musician would actually play a real string instrument. Same thing with playing any instrument because I'm around real instruments. Like I know the way a drummer would play real drums. because I'm around drummers. The way the bass player, well, I'm a bass player. The same thing with a guitar. Well, I play guitar. I play all those instruments. So I know how those instruments are. I'm going to capture that because. But if you don't know how a real guitar player would play guitar parts, and you're trying to, same thing with the strings. There's certain times where the way the strings, the bow is coming across the strings, the reaction of the bow. Because they people think that when they see a violinist, they're also arcing the bow a certain way to capture a certain sound. It's the same thing with the way a drummer would hit cymbals, whether it's a ride or a crash or whatever, a splash cymbal, whatever. There's a certain way you hit it to get it to sound a certain way. So you have to understand that to recapture that. If not, it's not going to sound realistic. Matt says, I've made people cry at weddings with just a voice and acoustic guitar. Hopefully not just because I was bad. Hopefully you made people cry because the song was an emotional song. Because a lot of times, if it was bad vocally, you're not making people cry. You're making people, like, instead of bad, you're making people mad because they're like, oh, I wish they stopped. So, Warhard says, I have some free VST screens that will do. I live to rural area to find session musicians worth a damn. Believe it or not, like, for example, the strings in Analog Lab 5, a lot of those instruments in Analog Lab 5 are pretty darn realistic sounding. In Analog 5. Here's another way you can really, this is where you're going to use 40-50 tracks, right? Because here's the thing, when it comes to an instrument, let's say you can have a violin. You can have, let's say, hey, you have a Philharmonic orchestra, right? And there's 10 violinists, there's 10 violas, 2 upright contrabass, and maybe 4 or 5 cellos, and so forth in that orchestra, along with the percussions, timpanis, you got the chimes, and everything else in that orchestra, right? You might even have a few horn sections, a few trumpets, a couple of trombones, maybe a few French horns, and a tuba in that entire horn, whatever the case. So let's say that's about 50 people. Believe it or not, and it's time consuming. Those parts are first violin and second violin, right? First cello, second cello, first viola, second viola. One way is to record, say, because the timbre of one violin, it could be a Wurlitzer violin. Another one could be a violin made by, I'm trying to think of another brand. Anyhow, the wood timbre of that one violin may sound totally different. Even the strings that they put on the violin, one could be a lighter sounding violin of strings than the other one. They might have whatever, or even the bow that they're using. So you can change the timbre of a few violins and the other timbre of the violin, even though they might be playing the same part. First violin may be playing this one part, then you might change the timbre and all that to give the effect of a different sounding set of violins. And same thing with your violas, and same thing with your cellos and so forth. Or someone can have using a Yamaha trumpet with a 7C mouthpiece. Another one could be using a Bach Stradivari trumpet with a 5C mouthpiece. Those horns, even though they sound like trumpets, this Bach's going to sound different than the Yamaha. You can make your trumpet sound just a little bit different, even though they're playing the same parts. First trumpet, second trumpet, third trumpet parts. And believe it or not, that will also create a more realistic orchestra sound, even though you're using a keyboard. Some people, they'll just use a string orchestra patch on their Yamaha or their Korg or whatever, or their VST instrument, and it'll be sound like that. But you can actually get like like for example, Analog Lab 5, and retune and change the quality of different violins play the same part, you'll be amazed. And then when they're paying one guitar, it's the same effect as if you put an actual ribbon or condenser microphone in the vicinity of those violins to get the effect of real violins. You'll be amazed how much that will sound like a real orchestra, even though they're a keyboard or VST instrument. So that'll be something that you ought to try in your next, when you want to come up with some string sounds and you want to make it sound like a real orchestra. And also, another thing that you can do when you group all those violins and instruments together, put a chamber reverb to make it sound like they're in this big room. It's the same thing as if you were in this big room in like Air Studios in London, using that room sound of those strings. You'll be amazed how much more realistic that will sound. So, all right. Now let me see. Matthews has this. I use drummers off Fiverr quite a bit. Okay, gotcha. Hey man, what's going on? No biggie. I started about 6:45, so no biggie. Central Standard Time. So I was just talking about song composition, recording and stuff like that, just like the title says. So Matthew said, yeah, if you're doing a MIDI string layering is key, and then remember the EQ of each instrument and where they sit in the, yeah. It's kind of like basic, yeah. It's kind of like a lot of people don't think I'm just going to use one violin sound or one string sound. But if you really want, let's say you MIDI a melody, you can take that 4 or 5 times and then change the quality of the instrument. And then, of course, the way you EQ and pan and everything else, you'll be amazed how much that starts to sound like real strings, especially if you understand the texture of how a violin plays a violin. Oh, he says I got 2 drummers in Argentina. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I forgot Matthews is overseas. A lot of us are in the United States. So, but there's people from all over to watch YouTube. So, let's see. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So believe it or not, if you're going to capture, wow, what time is it? You said you're in Australia. Okay. I'm in the United States. I'm on Central Standard Time. So here it's 8:22 p.m. right now. So what time is it there in Australia right now? Because I know Australia is way, we're talking, I guess it would be more of the, I don't even call it the Pacific, but it's closer to, it's 11:22 a.m. Monday. So y'all are ahead. Oh, so when I do these live streams, it's in the morning for you because it's in the evening here. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. I forgot when I was in Korea, that's where we were. When I was stationed in Korea, we were dead, day or half a day ahead, like 14 hours ahead or something like that. So, oh man, I think, man, because your man says I use Nashville session studs most of, yeah, because Nashville they got a whole union of musicians, session musicians down there. So, let's see. Maddox says I'm in the future, and let me tell y'all so it's kind of like waiting. So way down under. Okay, I got you. So that's just kind of what I want to talk about for this live stream, was just The song composition, progression choices, musicians, how they play is what the recording is. That's the whole point of capturing in the recording is basically because if no matter what genre people like, whether it's country, rock, hip hop, EDM, jazz, R&B, whatever, a good song and good song composition that's what's going to make you like the song, not necessarily because it was recorded on a Neve console or it was recorded on an API or ran through some, Avalon preamps or whatever. That's, what matters is the song. And then the gear is just capturing that. And then the mixing engineers is going to coheat all that together. And the master is just going to, once again, mastering is mastering. But if it ain't a good song, I don't care what kind of gear you recorded on. It may be a good song to somebody. Somebody's always going to like something. I don't care what it is. But the general population will not. So Matthew says, I can see Antarctica from my window. Well, that's wow. I don't think you can, but he said, I was just kidding. Okay. Man, so I just want to throw out that scored another Neve 1073 OPX8 channel preamp for Dirt Cheap today. Dirt Cheap today. And I'm freaking happy about it. Okay. Nice. Because you like me. I just bought these Callies, but I'm about to drop some nuggets on some Dyne Audio LYD 48s. So those could be I'm about to buy those monitors too. Until I'm able to get the cash up to get these AP. I'm looking at these ATC 25s, SCM 25As. So we'll see what happens. Born Schmidt says, too many channels always talk about gear, but barely about compose. Yes, true. Because, a lot of people want to talk about gear, but I want to talk about song and song composition because, with the gear, I can have, like I said, I can have a Neve VR48 console. I can have 4 Pultec EQP 1A. I can have a couple of Tube Tech CLB1s or whatever. I can have 3/4 distressors. I can have this. I can have that. It does not matter if I'm not recording good songs through all that gear. Makes absolutely no difference whatsoever if the songs. And like I said, there are people that are going to make songs that people are going to like, but then that's why so many different genres. There are people that love country. I'm not big on country. I think country's okay. I'm not a big country person. My style of music is gospel, jazz, R&B. But people that have been watching my channel for the longest knows this. I know I'm a jazz, gospel, R&B person. I like some EDM music. I'm not really big on a lot of hip hop unless it's 90s or older. I'm talking Tupac days. Other than that, I'm not really big on hip hop. I definitely don't like mumble rappers. And then I like classic rock stuff. I like the 80s stuff. Going back to the Def Leppard. When it comes to rock records, the AC/DC, depends on the, I like some of the Van Halen tunes, stuff like that. Because I'm a musician, that's why I have a big wide range of, when it comes to that. I'm not just R&B only. Because I like to listen to real musicians playing real instruments because I'm a musician. So that's just me. But Oh, let me see. Going back to I missed a few things. Okay, this like man, getting that 1073. Didn't see. Um, I've heard a dozen people talk about the Dyne here lately. I wouldn't listen to them. And I'm like, okay, because I like the Callies. I like the Callies a lot, but I fell in love with those Dyne audio LYD 48s. And what's nice about them, they're actually affordable. Three-way, the LYD 48, they're about $1,200 a piece. And some people I said $1,200 a piece. Well, when we're talking about pro audio gear, $1,200 is actually cheap in the pro audio world compared to like $13,000 for a pair of ATC SEM 45As. And those are still, there are speakers that are 50 grand. Like some of them PMC audio, the PMCs and all that are 50 grand. Osbergers and just the list. There's some of them speakers have $100,000. So $1,200 a piece is actually not expensive. Just like with the Atom, I think the Atom AHs are about $2,500 a piece. So let me see. Married to, I got 2 speeding fines, $660. That oh wow. Gotta slow down, man. They be running radar. you gotta slow down, man. Them cops, man, they're good. Because a lot of times they say when you can see a cop and he's got radar, he's already clocked you. Warheart. I keep saying Wayhart. Warheart Art says, great point. I see some guys thinking they're brilliant for putting 4 bars of I have to go back to what I had to do that in a different video on, when they start getting rid of like the music programs in schools, they really started cheating people out of knowledge when it comes to music. Matches, I write 100 songs. They are bound to be a few good ones that come. I'm not writing that many songs like I used to. But when I do, I only try to write something that I think sounds good, that might have a good hook, that I think that's the only time I'll write something. Other than that, I just can't write something just to be doing music. Because I'm not feeling it. I can't do it. I'm not feeling it. But that's just me. Or says mumble, yeah. And I heard a rap. I was listening on one of the channel, 101.9 or 101.1 or whatever, out of Nashville, and it was like, well, is it, yeah, yeah. I can't. I mean, here's the only thing, playing devil's advocate for that, is there are millions of people that like it. And if they're going to the shows and buying the tickets and the concerts to watch these, I can't do it, but there are people that like it. So, say Rockport Tigger, welcome. And then man says, I listen to everything modern because it's my job to make it, even though I don't like the style. Like me, I'm not booking. I'm not clients. I don't have a rented studio. I'm a private studio that only deal with certain clients. So I have that luxury to not have to worry about, oh man, here come my artist that's gonna music that I don't like. I don't want to do that. So I might just say, yeah, and Focal. I was listening to the Focal Shapes. And those are great speakers too. But I like those Dyne Audio LYD 48. So, Matthew says Quested. Yeah, I think there's a guy, he has a channel, he talks about Quested. He loves Quested. So I haven't listened to Quested, so I don't know. I'm not gonna sit there and say they're not good. I've never listened to them. Let me see. Oh, Matthew has said, I was going slow You can't you can't get a speeding ticket for going slow if you were really going slow. He said, "Mumble 808s and Mumble Man. That's where it's at. To them, not to me." Oh, man says I love the folk out trios. Um, um, so anyhow, um, like I said, there are a lot of people that like a lot of the hip hop stuff. It's just not for me. But I'm not gonna sit there. I would never down because people like it. There are millions of people that like it. So and that's really what's important is their audience, the people that whatever music. If you got millions of people following a certain genre of music, that's really what's important to that people that create the music for that audience. It's kind of like if someone goes back and like me, I still like 80s and 90s and quite a bit of 70s, but I would not expect someone who's 19 to like 70s, 80s, and 90s. Just because I do. So that was kind of like the premise of he said, "True, we're just old." And that's just what it's kind of like someone who's probably 70, they probably like 50s and 40s. Big band, the swing era, the 30s, 40s, and 50s music. I mean, someone in the 70s, 80s, they probably don't even like 50s music. They probably like 40s and 30s music. But music is also generational. I wouldn't expect no 80-year-old to be going around, doing all this, it just wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't expect that, So, Tax Committee says, me myself, I like everything kind of genre, whatever type of music. I try everything. Like I said, for me, my main and I'm not gonna say if something came out in 2025 that if it sounds good, it captures, even if it's made in 2025, if it captures me, naturally I'm gonna like it. But most people just aren't making anything I like. So Maine says my 70s R&B. That's just, it's kind of like I don't know. I just like, to me, I like 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's just me. He said, Rockport said, isn't Snoop Dogg 8? No, Snoop Dogg is 90s. Snoop Dogg really 92, 93, especially when he started collaborating with Dr. Dre, especially when Dr. Dre came out with the Chronic album. Those are Snoop Dogg's early days. But Snoop Dogg was definitely 90s. But believe it or not, Tupac, when he was alive, was 88, and because he started with Digital Underground. And then he, before he went solo, started doing the solo stuff in 1991. But Tupac, as many albums that Tupac put out and all the music Tupac put out, Tupac had a short life. Because he was killed in 96. And he did a few movies. And then on top of that, the sad part is Tupac hadn't been out of jail for about it wasn't very long. Then he went to Vegas and of course got into that scuffle with Orlando Anderson and in the MGM Grand Studios, and then they found him on the strip and gunned him down. But the cops knew it was Orlando Anderson way back in early. Who caught Tupac? They knew Orlando Anderson shot him, and then they just didn't have enough evidence to, And then of course, he gets killed at a car wash. Conveniently after they a lot of stuff coming out, and they found out who it was. He was at a car wash, and all of a sudden he gets gunned down. Because So. Yeah, Tupac was originally from the East Coast. Tupac was not from LA. He was actually from the East Coast. But that was kind of like not, rest in peace, Tupac, but Tupac didn't know how to separate from being trying to be a street thug and trying to live that gang life, Crips and all that, compared to just keeping him separated as an artist. Sometimes these rappers are actual real gang members, but a lot of these rappers are not. They're not street like they're trying to rap in some of these records. Some of these rappers they're not, And the one thing about the street and real gang people and real people that is about the street life, they don't care if you're a celebrity or not. That's the crazy part. Robert says Tupac was from Irvington, Baltimore, off of Canton Avenue. I believe, like I said, I don't know exactly where he's from. You definitely know, which means that if you know that he's from Irvington, Baltimore, which means you're from that area, because you said that you live right down the street from you, so that. But I've never been to Baltimore, so you definitely would know more than I mean. Like, man, I know people from Dayton, Ohio, because that's where I'm from. So Matthew Hess says the first record holds up is a party. Okay, like I said, I've never, like I said, when it comes to not Biggie, but when it comes to Snoop, like I said, I started hearing him when he started really, especially with Dr. Dre, especially collaborating on the Chronic. So, but I'm sure he probably has records before that. So that's pretty much it for this live stream. Like I said, I was just talking about a good song. So basically, in that order, a good song with having a good song. Once you have a good song, having a good song composition. Because the song composition is probably the most important portion of that song, is how it's going to be arranged, how it's going to be, the idea, the drums, the bass, the strings, the instruments, everything, because that's what's going to make people like it. Not because you ran it through a Neve or an API console. You ran through some high preamps and FET 47 microphones or whatever. That's not what's going to make people. It's the song, the composition, the arrangement. That's what's going to make people like the song. And then, of course, being mixed and mastered is just part of the process. So, man says, yeah, but the gear makes the recording. Well, naturally, that's kind of like, but what I'm saying is that, the audience doesn't care about the gear. They don't know about gear to care about it. You may have, I have, a lot of people on this channel do. A lot of us know about 1073 preamps and things like that. But I guarantee you go down and get Linda Johnson, who does hair. She knows nothing about a Neve. She like, you go on, hey Linda, like you go down and tell Linda, hey man, I just pick up this 1073 OPX, 8-channel, she gonna be like, okay, that's great. What's that? Well, that's what I'm going to record when I record these vocals or whatever through my studio. She's like, okay. Now you throw in a song that you did in your recording studio and you're like, oh yeah, I like that song. That's what Linda knows. So, so like I said, it starts with, you have to have a song and a good song composition, then having good gear and all that to record it through, is part of the process, because you want it to sound as good as possible, right? So, naturally, we're gonna, I'm gonna record through those Neves or whatever. Then the mixing, the mastering, but that's the process. But I was trying to answer kind of like a question I got about understanding what makes good music and all this, and that's what I want to kind of talk about, um, with the progressions and things like that. The song progressions and understanding good. I was mad you said, yeah, Linda doesn't know. Um, so forth. He said Miss Warhart notices the price, not the tone. Oh, you talking about, yeah, when you're paying for that gear? Yeah, especially if she's watching budget. When I first got married, I had to sneak some of my car parts because like my wife would, my ex-wife would like, because I was spending money on my Mustang. She like, I just got tired of it being in one ear. Like, yeah, 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 yeah. She don't understand why I'm spending $2,000 on a pair of cylinder heads. Well, that's gonna make the car run a ton better. But not picking on you, man. I'm not picking on you. Just want to let you know I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying we know about gear, but I was just using Linda as an example that she doesn't know or care. That's all. You know, not pick. I hope you don't think I was picking on you, because I'm not. Um, um, so um, that was going to pretty much wrap it up. I said, "Oh, dude, you're into Fox Body Mustangs. My wife loves them and hates them. I love the others though." Oh yeah, I've had my Fox Body Mustang for 28 years, and it is no joke. It's built. I mean, Canfield heads, comp cam, long tube headers. I got a 300 shot of nitrous, 373 gears. I mean, the car only weighs 3,000 pounds. Runs all motor, low 12s and a quarter. On spray, I mean, you're hitting low 11s. The car is fast. But he says, is cage? No, not yet. I have an 8-point cage for it. I just haven't had it welded, but I do have a cage for it. So, but yeah, I'm running, Edelbrock intake, MSD ignition, MSD billet distributor, MSD 8.5, 1.6 rotor rockers, 2-core aluminum racing radiator, you name it. So a B&M short shifter. But I have a twin turbo kit for it. But I'm waiting to get a different block. I'm gonna get a Dart 363 stroker block for that, and then I'm put the turbos on it, so it'll be a 9-second car. Yeah, definitely gonna need a cage for that. So, but yeah, it's my driveway. Let's see. Matthew says I buy gear, then help my wife pay credit cards also. Yeah, you gotta watch the debt though, because debt, credit cards can be. Phew. It's a man said my wife wants another one. Yeah, I also have an O2, but it's just a V6. And I was thinking about turning that into a Cobra with a 4.6 or even a Coyote, run a supercharger on it. But I don't know yet. But yeah, that Fox body. But I also have a Vet. I have a C5 Vet, but it has an LS1 in it. Original LS1 that came in it, and it's got long tube headers on it and black wing intake and Corsa exhaust and all that. It's in the garage. So yeah, I have a Corvette. I have a C5. And it don't have a whole lot of mods like my Mustang, but it's it's in the garage. I got to figure out on my Corvette. I got to figure because the dash lights are stuck on. They won't turn off, and it's draining the battery. So I got to replace that with that. So, but yeah, I keep that in the garage. Man says track car. No, I can drive. No, I drive my Mustang on the streets. It's got AC and you got power windows and I got a radio in it and I drive it. It's just a very fast street car. So I always said I'm down with the 2000 Mustang. Yeah, I have an 02, but it's just a V6. So let's see. Matthew says my budget doesn't run deep enough for cool cars. Well, I would say a lot of sacrifice for retirement. Being retired from the army, and and able to do other things to supplement my income. So yeah, it helps. Oh, it says, man says I got a 64 and a 60 and a C7. I thought about getting a C7. I want the Z06, but there's still, even to today, the C7 Z06s are still averaging 60 to 70,000. I just don't feel like dropping that kind of cash on a C7, even though I like the C7s. So Matthew said I got a Hyundai i30. Okay, I've never heard of a Hyundai i30, but a lot of times there are cars that are in different countries that you don't see in the States that we don't get. So, like when I was in Germany, there was cars that you would never seen. So man says I like the C8. I'm not feeling the C8 for some. A lot of people like the C8s, but I'm just not feeling the C8s. For some odd reason, I just C5, C6, and C7s is the Corvettes I basically, So let's see, do I want the most recent Corvette, but they're basically supercar expensive. Yeah, I just see like Maine say he says he likes the C8, but I just a lot of people like the C8s. I'm not really feeling them. But that's just me. So yeah, C8s are, especially the Z06s and the ZR1s. Ooh. So, but anyhow, I'm a wrap because it's over 2 hours, and I just wanted to kind of talk about that for the live stream, and call it for the night because it is going on 9 o'clock here, and I gotta do some other stuff. So, like I said, I'll throw in some topics to talk about next week. Other than that, that's going to do it for everyone for the night. I'm glad everyone tuned in, and we're going to see y'all next week, if God willing, and we'll keep the live stream going. Thanks for everyone tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time. Appreciate you, everyone that tunes in and follow the channel. All righty, y'all have a great one.